the number one person that everyone is talking about, and it's not an AEW thing, it's not a WWE thing. She's just the person to shit on this week. Last week was Hulk Hogan. This week is 2 weeks ago was Hulk Hogan. This week is Britt Baker. And you know how wrestling goes. There's always someone to dump a heavy and hard one on a consistent basis. But it seems, from people's assumptions, from the dirt sheet writers, the political writers of our wrestling industry, has said that Britt Baker is completely done with AEW. And we truly have no proof of that. That may be hearsay from the pundits down in AEW. That may be true from a couple of people's personal perspectives down in AEW. But we do not 100% know that's a fact. There's also information that came out that says that, well, you know, Britt Baker is going to be taking a little bit of a break, and we have nothing for her right now. There's nothing we can do. We can't come up with nothing good, and maybe the stuff that we're coming up with, she's rejecting, and so on and so on. But this all really lies on the back of the fact that Britt Baker, last time we seen her on TV, Serena Deeb comes out and she's waving the flag to like her school or whatever that flag may be, and Britt Baker is standing there with her arm over the third rope and saying, "Nobody cares, nobody cares." Maybe Serena Deeb might have cared. Maybe Tony Khan might have cared. A lot of people caught that and called to the front of the stage that she may not be there anymore, but definitely seemed to have been suspended, or just, again, nothing for her to do. And Britt Baker is no stranger to having beef with talent in the back. We all know that she had her famous blowout with MJF behind the scenes about them having 1 hour to wrestle on TV, and it's taken away from opportunities from other talents, and especially the woman who only gets given 3 to 4 minutes of time, or 6 minutes of time, or barely one match, or maybe one match on the show, maybe two, but it doesn't equate to enough TV time. And it was one time at a press junket after one of the pay-per-views where Tony Khan said, when he was asked about giving the women more TV time and more presentation time to present themselves and show their talent and give the women more time on the show, I think it came down to a promo where he said, "I'm not going to basically throw away TV time to the people who don't draw ratings or are not pulling the numbers the way they want to. And unfortunately, it's the men that pull the ratings." I'm summarizing kind of what he said, so don't fucking hang me on what I'm saying. And that can be an uncomfortable thing if you are a woman in the entertainment industry, a woman in sports entertainment and wrestling itself, and you want to showcase yourself, prove yourself. And all wrestlers have an ego. All wrestlers have a dream that they want to be number one and on top. And I get it. Maybe Britt Baker's attitude is based off of where she feels she's belonged, because she was the darling of AEW at one point when there was no woman on the roster. Turn around today, there's 40 women on the roster most likely, and there's no spot for her, maybe in her personal perspective. I do not know Britt Baker. I know one person who used to be in AEW who knew Britt Baker, and I never even asked him a question about it, and I never will, because it's none of my fucking business. And the whole knowing what's happening backstage in AEW, WWE, TNA, and New Japan, that's just something I have a complete issue with to begin with. I'll get to later on in the show. But Britt Baker, they blamed her years ago when Cody Rhodes left AEW and him and his wife went on to go back to the WWE, and for some reason they blamed Britt Baker, and Cody Rhodes cleaned it up and said, "Hey, you know what? That has nothing to do with me. I don't know what they're talking about. That just seems like internet talk," and I think there was hearsay. There's also the issue between her and what's the other one? Thunder Rosa. She had a criticism about Thunder Rosa, and I think, in her fairness, she has a right to critique her own peers. She's worked with the women, she's wrestled with the women, she's backstage with the women. And if that's her personal opinion and she publicly gave that critique, then let her have that critique. Now, the critique could have been a work, for all we know. Or it could have been genuinely how she felt, or two things can be right at the same time. And it might have been a combination of both. But we're in a business where we're still trying to trick the fans that everything somehow is real. But then if they say something that seems like it should be fake, or says something you don't like, you now the fans seem to get upset and say, well, we didn't like what we got there. Well, she can't say that publicly. And what if she was working the crowd the whole fucking time? They have a product to sell. They have to promote themselves. They have to make themselves look the best. They have to make you believe that they are what you want. They have to make you believe that. And I think we've reached the era of professional wrestling on this large televised scale where even though everything on the screen is a work, or I'm going to stop using the wrestling terms. I'm going to say it for the way you should process it. Everything may be a performance for the screen. Maybe something, if they want you to believe that performance is real, if you're taking all her words literally, then when do they get to be the performer and when they get to be separate from it? We don't know. But if the wrestler's being told work the crowd at all times, even when you're not on the television screen, her critique of that particular person might have been a work. We don't know. Or it might have been real, or maybe it might have been real. AEW, when it first started, to me, was the business of everybody going into business for themselves. And the company is only 5 years old. They're still searching for their fucking structure, for God's sakes. Vince McMahon and the WWE is 50 something, almost 60 years ahead of the machine that AEW is building. TNA is damn near tripping on. I think they're just approaching 20 years of age, and WWE had 30 something years ahead of them, 40 years ahead of them. So we're asking, and now if you look at TNA, they're shaping up into a company that went through a lot of leadership, a lot of made money, a lot of lost money, a lot of trying to keep talents. Their talents being purged by other companies. Now they're in a partnership with WWE. There's a lot going on there. So, and there's a lot more women in professional wrestling today on screen that wasn't there when Britt Baker started with AEW as one of the originals. But as we all know, who you start off with is not who you're going to end up with. Is not who you end off with in the long run. Sometimes it's just like that. Then Britt Baker had, what was that heavyset girl's name she had beef with? Lufisto. And then Britt Baker had beef with Lufisto. And I think Ruby Rose was I said Ruby Rose. Excuse me, I'm sitting near my window podcasting, and this truck has no respect for what I'm doing. But anyhow, no, Ruby Riot, I'm saying Ruby Rose, excuse me. But this woman has had a lot of beef with a lot of fucking talent. It happens. Lufisto was one of the people who was complaining about who said don't talk to who and bringing Goldust into it. And she kind of had nothing to say about the whole AEW framework and the whole AEW situation. And that is what it is. What do we have to do? And it's just a lot of people she has beefed with in the industry itself. She may be a hard personality to deal with. Wrestlers don't like each other. Co-workers don't like each other. But I wanted, before I stumble on to the backstage information being a big issue for the everyday fan or the fans who do what I do and they talk wrestling, I want to take a very heavy and strong look back at when she said nobody cares. What if she wasn't being rude? What if Britt Baker, now I'm going to shoot this bitch some bell. What if Britt Baker was just sitting there with her arms over the rope and the woman came out doing her performance with it, and Britt Baker was like, they was told, hey, by the agent, hey, make sure you act like nonchalant. You're the heel in this situation, this, that, and the other. We don't know, but this could have been a conversation. Let's just say hypothetically. And she just happened to say, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And the mic might be picking up. We're reading her lips. These cameras have great audio systems that are great, that you can catch some noise from the distance. The under the stage is mic'd up. And she might be saying, nobody cares. Nobody cares. What if that was just her being in character? And it was just part of the work and the development that she's doing in the presentation while she's standing in the ring, getting a promo to get them hyped up for the program that her and Serena Deeb is doing. Now, it also could have been a scenario where she straight up and down said, nobody cares, nobody gives a fuck. This shit is trash. I can't even believe they're putting me in the ring with you. I was AEW world champion. I was such and such. I'm this, I'm that. This is beneath me and blah, blah, blah. That could have also been the world. And both things can be right at the same time. But what if we're at a point where we really can't tell what's real and what's not? Back in the day, that was called, in the television world and in the wrestling world, that's called kayfabe. You don't know what's real. You think it's all real. But what if she was just doing her regular fucking job and the whole internet and the dirt sheet writers and all of this took that as a complete fucking insult? For all we know, she could have just said, you know what, Tony, I'm not feeling this. I'm reading the responses from everybody online. Maybe I need another fucking break. Let's cool the engines. I'll go away. I'll learn a new wrestling hold, as you would hear famously said, and I'll come on back to your show and I'll do what I got to do. Let's find me someone I can work with. But the problem is, Britt Baker has worked with a few people and it just didn't work out. We all know that the most famously non-working situation was her and Mercedes Moné. I don't think Mercedes Moné is the best promo woman in the world. I don't think Britt Baker is the best promo person in the world. You need one person to be a great leader in your promos if one person isn't. And their first face-to-face was a beautiful confrontation. But when they first came together, and then it all fell apart because of background and backstage politics. Granted, it happens. It affects things. I don't give a fuck what Britt Baker would have done wrong. You don't take her off of TV when you're going into one of the biggest promotional things going into the biggest story for the women's locker room at that time between her and Mercedes Moné. She is to be on TV. She is to be doing interviews with podcasters. She is to be going to whatever the radio stations are still letting wrestling talents come up there. In that particular situation, she should be out there consistently and nonstop, pushed down our throats. But pushed in front of us to always present her. You should be doubling down on her and Mercedes Moné. And then we got this whole thing where she was gone for basically 2 to 3 weeks. They get to the biggest pay-per-view of the company's career, and that match was still kind of a bust. I'm going to blame both women for it. But again, backstage politics got involved. The media got a hold of it. The dirt sheet writers marketed it, sold it, remarketed it, resold it. 1,000 videos went out on YouTube about it. We all listened and watched the same shit. We all read the same articles, and then we come down together and it summarizes that everything that we learned wasn't good for the talent's public perception at all. And it affected that. And she has been on that downhill slide since that moment, which brings me to my next biggest issue, is the fact that we should not even be knowing what the fuck is going on backstage. We should have no identity with who's beefing with who's fighting who. You know, back in the day, and I'm going to do a totally separate episode on this, but this is kind of Dave Meltzer's fault. Why do we have to know inside baseball information? We shouldn't. We should turn on our TVs, take what they give us and enjoy it. But somehow there's a sensationalization of people wanting to be the ones who just consistently shit on the professional wrestling industry, even though they're saying they're just reporting and helping the industry. And we know all this information, and now based off of their backstage politics, not that they're developing as they're working through their locker rooms. Now we have guys like Dave Meltzer and the Sean Ross Sapps and all of these guys coming together, and it's like gangbusters on this one particular woman or whoever they don't like or whoever the dirt is coming out about. In the early 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, and kind of in the early thousands, I'm gonna say before 2005, this shit really wasn't pushed in front of us, though we heard situations, we heard about things mainly through Dave Meltzer, we took away the most important element, which was the presentation of the actual show. And now we're caught up in who said what to who's doing what with who's fucking who's fucking Jey Uso, who's rubbing Jey Uso's thigh. Now a girl is being canceled on another show, which is another episode I'll do something on. But the reality is all of this backstage mess has damaged the fan from truly enjoying the product. And not all fans are reading the dirt sheets, but YouTube is at our fingertips, and so many fans are consuming the product of professional wrestling that even the new consumption of professional wrestling is watching the hundreds and thousands of videos just like this, the podcast just like this, that in a lot of instances are telling what's happening backstage. I do not like that type of talk. It damages the industry. And then the politics, especially with a lot of the older wrestlers who are podcasting, a lot of the people who didn't become the wrestlers they wanted to be, not the guys who turned it down, but the people who didn't become the wrestlers they didn't want to be, who are reporting on this, the person who wanted to be one of the boys in the back who are reporting on this, we come to find out that they are consistently and repeatedly looking for more dirt to shit on. As we heard Jim Ross said, most of the boys in the back are spilling the information about the boys in the back. So there's no respect to it. And then we're at the point where everybody's trying to beat each other to the punchline. So something simple that Britt Baker said on TV, which should have been dismissed, now has become the number one entity of her career's destruction, according to dirt sheet writers and now us YouTubers and now the fans. This shit's got to completely stop. Now, I'm not shooting Britt Baker any bail. You know, if she's a piece of shit, she's a piece of shit. That is for her to tell us that she is. That is for her to show off. But in reality, none of us has seen any of this. Everything is hearsay. So I'm gonna stand on the fence on this one. We don't know when she said nobody cares. We don't know if that's the Britt Baker character and not the Britt Baker the person. And we don't know if Britt Baker the person stepped on top of Britt Baker the character and was saying nobody cares. I think we do know she's not happy with her position in the company. I think we all know that she is not happy that she doesn't have the best storylines, that she's not getting enough TV time, because like I said, every wrestler is an egocentric machine. And when you get on that idiot box, which is the television, when you got people consistently saying when you want to be on TV, you want to be at a look at me scenario and look at me by any means necessary. So we don't know. 50% of me feels and knows that Britt Baker went into business for herself. But I think everybody, when they joined AEW, because they didn't come from structured companies like Chris Jericho and Big Shows and a few others, I think this was, I want to go into business. I want to consistently go into business for myself. And unfortunately, based off of what AEW is going through right now, I think it's a full locker room of everybody learning maybe Tony Khan doesn't have control. This is a 5-6-year-old company, and everybody's trying to grab the boss's ear, and he's being pulled in 1,000 directions. He didn't learn wrestling politics like Vince McMahon did from his father and watching the industry. He's had enough money. He did what a lot of people with $1 billion would do who loves wrestling, and he started his own wrestling company. Applaud him. A lot of us wish we can do that. There's a lot of guys starting indie wrestling federations and companies across the United States and across the world, and all of them someday want to compete with the WWE. It's a dream of people who started. I know a lot of people who started indie feds, and that was their federations, wrestling companies, and that was their goal. So we're in a scenario now where Britt Baker is consistently, I want to be on the screen. I want the best storylines. And Tony Khan attention span, I don't know the man to say this, but when you got so much talent, I dare anybody to take 200 pieces of talent with only 4 hours of TV a week and figure out what to do with them. I challenge you. 90% of your roster will be left off of that Wednesday show and that Friday show. When you do that pay-per-view, 90% of your roster is going to be left off of that pay-per-view. So, and then you'll say, well, he's hiring too many people. No, he's not, because people get injured. You got people who are on the development. Imagine if Vince stopped hiring people after Hulk Hogan. Imagine if Vince said, I got 20 guys, that's enough. No, I need hundreds of people. This is an ever-changing machine. It's like a company. You always want to keep 2 or 3 extra employees, even if it's costly, because when that person calls out, or that person, you have to fire that person, or you have to move someone in, boom goes the dynamite, and everything moves smoothly. You got the wrestler. I think the men and women who are in the locker rooms need to understand that they're a part of a gear system, and their gear can get replaced at any time. That's all I'm saying. Let's let the Britt Baker situation, let her tell us the story instead of a bunch of dirt sheet writers. It seems like she's not fired in reality. It seems like, go home, take another break. We'll send you your check. That's it. And if she gets let go, let's hope that she could go to WWE and learn some structure and learn how the industry works from their perspective. And maybe, I think, my personal opinion, Britt Baker is one of those talents that this is what happens when you consistently go into business for yourself. And maybe you need to go into WWE where the structure is so strong that you learn everything that you did wrong. There's a difference between the mainstream and the indies. And AEW is not the indies, but there's a lot of indie mentalities in AEW. And that is always going to clash. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next episode.